How often do we think about the narrative of video games? Every game has some story to tell. Some games' storylines are simple and take a back seat to the gameplay. Other games take more liberty, creating a vast and winding plot like those typically associated with movies or TV shows. By this time, you probably have typed out in the comments box Mass Effect, Infamous, BioShock, the myriad of sandbox games out there, maybe Shadow of the Colossus, and if you're over 20, Final Fantasy VI. Those are all fine games with a lot to contribute, but I am talking about when games use the interactive medium to tell a completely different kind of story. Not just a story about the characters within, but the story of the gamer's journey to the end credits. The original Mega Man X is a great game. Compared to the classic Mega Man, X is a smoother, more fast-paced experience. X has you dashing around the stages, bouncing off the walls, and busting robots in a war-torn future of the Mega Man classic. And yet, for all that difference in gameplay, Mega Man X still doesn't go out of its way to tell a particularly engaging story. The dialogue only really serves to enforce what we can already figure out by ourselves: hero, friend, enemy, and final boss. I am very well aware of the backstory to Mega Man X, but back then, you wouldn't know much unless you looked it up in the instruction booklet, and even then, the story merely plays out as a tried-and-true quest to stop bad guys. And to be honest, that's all we needed from it. Plot aside, Mega Man X still had an impact and plenty to discuss around the playground. Why do we need to run around these stages and destroy these 8 Mavericks? Because it's Mega Man X! Show of hands, who on their first playthrough went to Chill Penguin first? Remember giving the snip snip to launch Octopus's tentacles? How about charging up the Chameleon Sting for the climb into Sigma's tower? I still remember how much of a crowning moment of awesome it was when my HP extended above my weapon energy. It felt like that shouldn't even be possible. And of course, to summarize, Mega Man X won't win Screenplay of the Year, but it doesn't need to. It was a video game in that pure sense. Fast forward to over 10 years later, when there are now 8 main installments in the series. After Mega Man X3, the series stopped being so old school and really pushed its cinematic qualities. X1 through 3 were very colorful and had character designs that weren't entirely fitting to the overall setting, but they didn't need to be because they were cool. The first 3 titles also had musical scores that emphasized a heavy metal motif. X4 and on made the most of the superior graphical quality and boasted a soundtrack full of techno-rave sound. Both are great and perfectly fitting for their generations. What would happen then when Capcom decides to remake the first Mega Man X on the PSP using the newer school design? The result is greatly positive. The game is a mishmash of old school design meeting new school technology. There's some creative liberties, but none that stray too far from the source material to fit the PSP's graphics. It's also fun to see the frame-by-frame gestures of some of the bosses translated into 3D animation. The music may be more divisive. Just listen to Storm Eagle's stage on the SNES and compare it to the PSP version. The SNES version is a harder-hitting metal, and the PSP version goes with the post-X3 techno-rave. Whether you like one or the other, I can definitely say that this rendition goes with this game. Mega Man X was all about the spectacle of being an extreme version of Mega Man, with bigger explosions and faster action. Maverick Hunter X is more charged by the story of these strictly programmed beings dealing with the concept of deep thought and emotion. By itself, the PSP soundtrack is great and fitting. Storm Eagle's theme gives the feeling of a battle in the sky. Launch Octopus's theme contains those aquatic tropes, and Armored Armadillo's theme seems to more reflect the manic fast pace of the trolley rides, which, by the way, were the best part of the original that gave Blast Processing a run for its money. At this point, I'd like to establish that here on Scripted Events, we judge games based on their PIP, plot, immersion, and presentation. Plot refers to the actual storyline of the game. Immersion refers to how much a gamer can get lost in the game world. Presentation refers to the various design choices in the game that contribute to the experience of playing it. I'm not going to shove these precedences down your throat, or refer to them very often, but I do notice that a lot of what I talk about falls under these three categories. That said, does Maverick Hunter X have the pip to stand out? It's game time.